Hi guys, in this video we are going to see how to write a unit test cases for the Spring Boot application. Specifically if you are using a JDBC connection, because in some scenarios that we may need to go for JDBC database connections. So when we are using JDBC database connections, that time we will see like how we can able to write the unit test cases. Most of the people might not know, because programming means it ends only with the unit test cases, because whatever the code that we are writing, developers is the responsible for writing the unit test cases, and the test case also should get successfully executed when the test scenario is executing. Okay, so now we are going to see how to write a simple test cases for the login and registrations method, which I have done with the JDBC connections. Okay, so if you see the code, whatever you are saying here, maybe I will open my IDE. Yes, okay. So if you see the actual code is having a simple SQL query which has this username and password. Then below that I'm setting the value which is from the request, and we are then we are validating against the data whether it has the data or not. If it has the data, then we are considering as a success request, otherwise we are considering as a failure request. Okay. So with this scenario, we are going to write two test cases. One test case is for success scenario, another test case is for failure scenario for the login method. Again, test case is not mostly for a single method, mostly it will have a different variations conditions, correct? So in this scenario, now I'm going to handle the two scenarios. So one is if I am passing proper value, how it's going to react. If I am passing empty value, how it's going to react. Okay, so now we are going to the test cases. If you see here, I'm just set up the basic test files. So okay, and then I'm using inject mock. I'm injecting the user service because I want to call the service method, right? So I'm just injecting the mock here. Then we are using a named parameter JDBC template. This is also I am marking this one. Okay, so now coming to the first test case that I have created with the annotation called @test. So here we are creating the data. So this is like exactly that request which we are getting from the UI, right? So in test cases, we are going to set it our own test data. So for this thing, I'm just having a simple util method which has the static function and it returns the data. Okay. So now this data is setting up to this login request. Then we are as usual the same how the source code is having the value. With the same thing, we are also setting up the value. Then we are this is the data that we are expecting, which is like a database here. Okay, so in test cases, unit test cases, we need to handle all these things. Generally we should not use any database connections. So with the same scenario, I am also here just creating this is the expected data that I'm expecting. Okay, so the next one I am just marking the code. So what I am mentioning here, whenever this type of line is available in the actual code, so when there is a line like this, then I am expecting this type of data, which is nothing but in the actual code, this is where we are calling our database, correct? So what I am telling in the mockito, that whenever there is a code like this, then I am returning this one. So this is what we have written here. So once this is done, I am calling the actual code. So till this line, we are just setting up the unit test cases. This is not a actual code execution. This is just a testing of the setting up the testing cases. Okay, so now coming to this line, so here what are we doing to do? We are calling the actual code here. So by calling the actual code, whenever the execution is complete, it just returns the user model. The reason why I am mentioning is because this method in the actual code, it returns user model. So here also I am doing the same thing. So now we are getting the data. If it works fine, again we need to match with against the data, correct? So this data is nothing but the request which we have provided it. So which means the request data whatever we are passing to the server in the service method, that we are matching against this one. So this test data should match with the actual data. So this is what we have done. So in case if it is not matching, then the test case will fail. Okay, this is how the test case will, this is how the unit test cases will be designed in order to test our code. So if you are getting a proper output, which means proper response, then our test case is fine. Now coming back to the, okay, going to the next test case, which is kind of failed data, which means if I am giving a wrong username and password, how it is going to react. So this test also I need to check it out. So but in this scenario, if you see the actual code, whenever there is a no data, it will throw the error, correct? Because there is no, if there is an no data for the provided username and password. So here I am mentioning that it should expect the exception, and that exception should be same as this class actually. Okay, so this is the scenario for the exception data. Everything will be same, but now what I am telling is it should return the error because I am giving a wrong data. So when there is a wrong data, then when it gives the exception, I am just here managing the exception here. Okay, so this is how we can write a number of test cases with the different scenarios, but as of now I'm just writing only two scenarios with the one login function. Below that I have created some registrations also. So whenever that you want to do some registrations, so here I have done like this. Actually this is like a simple insert query validation. So here also I'm mentioning that whenever this line is getting executed, then return one number one. So numeric one is nothing but in JDBC template, whenever you are performing any insert operation, it returns the number one. So here also I am returning the same thing here. Okay. So now in the below, in the next line, you can see there is a expected I am mentioning. So which is nothing but this one. Okay. So this is how that registrations will happen. But generally, when it comes to the test cases, depends on the scenario, we have to write a number of test cases. For example, I have written 7 test cases for a single method which has lots of conditions. Okay, so like this depends on, it's not like one method should have only one test cases. So depends on the scenario, we have to write lots of test cases. Okay, so this is an example of Spring Boot and then Mockito framework. Okay, thank you.